My goal is for us to kind of fly through this tonight because I want us to have some discussion at the end. You guys get the email as far as okay. Yeah. Yeah. There was like one day the emails weren't working, but I'm communicating to you through the emails. So you guys need to be checking those often. And if you have an issue, then let one of us know so we can get that working.
I don't think I've got into it yet. I got your thing that said that there was a problem with the.
Yeah, for a day. Yeah, basically what happened is that they required a second verification. Until they got it, they shut us down, which is kind of stupid. But it was only like a day or so. But anyways, that came through before that happened. So anyways, I sent 3 questions. What's the biggest challenges when it comes to leadership, creativity, or ministry? What area of your ministry do you feel like that has the most potential with a little development? And what area of your personal leadership do you want to grow the most? So I was hoping we'd have some discussion. So I want to fly through the rest of this and get to that. Just kind of as a recap, 3 weeks ago, we started talking, sharing some dreams that we had for our ministry, the goals that we wanted to go. And then 2 weeks ago, we started talking about 2 wings of the airplane, right? One is spiritual and the other is leadership, right? And I feel like I probably this comes more naturally than this. So that's why I'm focused more on this off the front end. We talked about how ultimately leadership is just influence, and therefore every one of us has influence with someone. Therefore, every one of us is a leader to someone. So we have a responsibility to lead in such a way that is God honoring. The question is not if you're a leader. The question is the scope and the effectiveness of your leadership. And that's the question that I think we need to be asking in our ministries, because God has called us to equip the saints for the work of the ministry. Therefore, we should have a broad scope and we should be highly effective in what God has called us to do. Yes. Let me shut this music off, though.
I need help getting that email.
Hmm?
I need help with getting that email because I've not got my.
Still not working?
Well, I don't know that I know how to get into it. The first time I missed the link.
Okay.
Okay. Anyways, so we started talking about our spiritual value, or excuse me, our leadership values. We have our spiritual values, and then we have the second wing, the leadership values. And we talked about the first week is that we need to be spiritually healthy and be able to utter what Paul said, follow me as I follow Christ, right? We give up the right to be spiritually unhealthy. If we're going to be leaders in the church, we are going to be spiritually healthy. And then last week, we talked about how we're going to dream big dreams and that we need to have a big vision for what it is that God's called us to do. And if you don't have big dreams, then you can't lead anybody towards a destination, right? A dream, a vision is a combination of your values and purpose with an envisioned future. And we talked about how dreams are the destination in which we're leading people. The vision is where we're going. It's what energizes and leverages our culture and our team. We talked about how I have given you the values. We have our 5 spiritual values that we have been talking about a lot. And so you already have 1/3 of this equation. The question is what's your purpose? You should be able to write down your life's purpose in 1 sentence. We went through some exercises to do that. The 3 circles. What are you passionate about? What can you be the best in the world at? And what actually makes a difference for the kingdom of God? This is how God's designed you. And whatever comes into all 3 of those circles is most likely what God has equipped you to do. That's your purpose. That's your hedgehog. If you haven't watched that, you guys need to watch that, or you have no idea what I'm talking about. Okay. And so this is really important to me. All right. This is very important that we are constantly pointing towards a destination in every single one of our ministries. If we're not dreaming for the future and we're not leading our people somewhere, that's just not going to fly. Okay. We have to be having a purpose. And so if you guys haven't watched last week's, you need to watch it, because otherwise this ain't.
The fox and the hedgehog.
Yeah, absolutely. And so that part's really important for me. And so anyways, then we moved on to the value number 3, where we talked about excellence, right? We want to do everything well. Okay. And we don't want to do things haphazardly, so we want to do them well. And excellence is found in the preparation, details, and what's manageable. And so that gets us caught up to tonight. I'm going to get rid of this stuff. And I'm going to try to go hopefully for about 30 minutes or so. I've been trying to keep these short so that they're easier to watch. All right. And tonight we're going to talk about this. Leaders are constantly growing. All right. So every day I learn something new. Every day I learn something new. If you can read that. That's beautiful handwriting. Okay.
You know what they say about people that have sloppy handwriting, right?
No.
They think fast.
There we go. See, look how fast I'm thinking. I didn't even get all the letters in there. It's kind of in there. Okay. Something, there's an ing in there. Okay. Anyways, you guys have heard this before. Leaders are learners, and that's just the reality. So question, pop quiz. What are you currently or actively doing to grow? What's the last thing you did to grow as a person, as a leader, as a staff pastor?
This year I've been working on reading the Bible, so I've never done that.
Okay.
Doing that app, reading the Bible in 1 year.
Okay. That's good. What's the last thing you did? I got one. I went literally last week to see a mentor, a new mentor, a guy who just actually reached out to me. Most of the time it goes the other direction where you have to reach out to the person for this person. He's at church of about 1,500. His name's Terry Bates. And he just cold messaged me on Facebook. And he says, I never do this, but he said, like, God dropped it in my spirit. Somehow my name popped up in his Facebook feed. So I went and did that last week. And I've really been doing that a lot lately. I go through seasons where I try to allow new voices in my life. And so the last really several months, just the transition, I've been just sitting down with new people and different people and trying to get some perspective. And I've been trying to listen to a lot of different voices lately outside of the norm. I want to be well-rounded in my understanding of who God is. And so I've been listening to different types of people lately, people that might not run and aren't necessarily our theological circle, but bring a lot. I listened to a guy by the name of R.C. Sproul a lot lately. Have you ever heard that name, Brother Loki? Sproul, R.C. Sproul. He's dead now. So his stuff is actually new. And he, for example, I listened to him talk about nakedness the other day. And it was the best message on nakedness I ever heard. And it was so good and rich. He was preaching on Noah, how he gets drunk and he passes out naked. And what was the significance of that? He was going through the book of Genesis. And so anyways, that's what I've been doing. Anybody else have anything?
Well, it's funny because I went through a season where I didn't have really a mentor.
Mhm.
I would pray for mentors. And so God would, it just like you said, it would just be this connection I wouldn't even know was coming. And so now I feel like he sent me Charity to help me go to another level, because I feel like I've been just like plateaued and have some visions, but don't know how to get from here to what the next level is. And then my Bible studies have been, you kind of hit the nail on the head about the nakedness. I've been reading scriptures and like trying to see the detail behind it. If it's in the Bible, it has some purpose, like the nakedness. So I've been doing some just off the wall studies on the Bible app and then really picking apart those scriptures. So
that's good. Yeah, it's there for a reason. Very little that's written in there, I think, is just filler.
And looking at different translations and like if somebody has done a study or what their take is, just to have a different perspective on it, because I wasn't taught to do that. And so that tends to be where I've been at the past year, is going to a different level with the scripture.
Mm-hmm. That's important.
Sorry, go ahead.
Oh, you're fine.
Even before you a couple weeks ago preached on growth, on growing. That's come up several times in the last several weeks. So I've just been kind of diving deep in that and just trying to explore where that is supposed to take me. So not like one direction, but it's there. So I'm just kind of searching.
Mine's probably been using the tools that we talk about as far as like Bible study 101 stuff.
Yeah.
And just taking scripture and being intentional about what God's trying to teach me.
Yeah, to do that.
Through that. So
yeah, absolutely. And here's the tough thing, is that every year in your ministry, the harder it is to continue to grow. Is that fair to say, Brother Loki?
Yeah.
You have to be more intentional with it.
Yeah.
It makes me feel better, because it seems like compared to 20 years ago to now, you do have to be intentional, like a purposeful. I feel like as if a minister, it's something that you guys know, but for me, like a lay person, not knowing. Does that make sense? Like it's something you would have got in Bible school or in your studies, I'm having to do that now to get that. Instead of texting you and saying, what does this mean? Or, you
Yeah.
know, like I'm having to do that.
Yeah. That's good.
Well, yeah, I mean, and now the information is out there more than ever, than it ever has been before, as far as, learning through mentorship from somebody else.
Yeah.
Yeah, do podcasts.
Yeah.
Anything, yeah.
Well, there's tremendous amounts of knowledge available today,
Mm-hmm.
but I've kind of gone the other way. I used to sift through all the knowledge I could find.
Mm.
Now I try to get along with God and hear what He's got to say.
Yeah.
And I think
Way
that's-
more than what anybody else.
Yeah.
I think that becomes a
And
common
it,
deal too.
and a lot of that is, for one thing, I've accumulated, over the years.
Yeah.
Schooling and everything else, I've accumulated a lot of stuff that I don't have to look at.
Yeah.
It's been there.
You just know. Yeah.
But I'm more, I don't have a lot of time left. I know I don't have a lot of time left. And so I want to finish strong. So
Yeah.
I want to make sure I'm hearing what the Holy Spirit
Mm.
wants, not just what I want or what somebody else wants. And so I'm spending more time at that. It doesn't mean that I think I don't need that other right now. It's
Yeah.
just not as much a priority with me
Mhm.
right now as it was. And another thing that I have learned over the last probably 8, 9 years, maybe 10, is I wasn't always real open.
Mm.
In other words, I'm talking about two. I figure out where I stand on stuff, what the Bible says, and I have a tendency to get pretty cemented in that.
Mm-hmm.
And I found myself coming to a place where if people didn't do things like I did them,
Mm.
then the devil could use that to make me think they're wrong.
Mm.
They're not wrong.
Mm.
God's got infinite variety.
Mm.
He even watch his healing ministry. He healed the same thing 25 different ways. I mean,
Mhm. Yeah.
And so I have grown in that area, being more open to doing things another way. And at my age, and I'm a creature of habit, I've been doing stuff a long, long time. I'm probably not going to change that much myself, but I can receive the change,
Mhm.
and I can see God using the change better than I
That's
used
good.
to.
That's
And
good.
I'm trying to grow in that area and continue to grow in that area.
That's
And I
the
know
thing
good
for
and
me,
well,
too.
I don't have a corner on the market.
Yeah.
God's got infinite ways of doing stuff.
And Brother Lookie's just humble enough to say the thing that we're all going to fight with, because he says I got pretty cemented in my ways.
Yeah.
The truth of the matter is everyone gets cemented in their ways. I mean, Mark Rutland talked about that one time, not to digress, but he says, I'm irritated at these guys who say we're a church to young people. He said, okay. And this guy was at a college campus, so he loves young people. That's not his point.
Yeah.
His point is, okay, so what are you going to do when your young people get old? You going to kick them out of your church?
Yeah.
He says, and so the point is, it doesn't matter what season of life we're in, we're all cemented to our ways.
Yeah.
And so, because it can go in reverse, there are churches that we can go to right now that don't have drums, that don't have lights, and they have 5,000 people in there. Okay. And so it's not necessarily about methods, it's about how God's created you. And I think that's what you're saying, and honoring and the variety, because God works crazy ways through
Yeah.
strange applications.
This guy we were talking about in Chicago.
Yeah.
Completely unorthodox.
Completely unorthodox.
But
Yep.
man, it's working.
Largest AD church in the country.
And it's God. I mean, it's obviously God.
Yeah, no doubt about it.
So,
Absolutely. Well, the reality is that we all have to continue to learn. I love this proverb. This is one of my favorite proverbs. Proverbs 11:14. It says, "For a lack of guidance, a nation falls, but victory is won by many advisors." I mean, for lack of guidance, for lack of coaching, for lack of people speaking to your life, for lack of learning, a ministry falls. I mean, I think that's just a lot of truth to that. But victory is won through many advisors. I mean, the principle there is just overwhelming to me. And that goes, I think, in every aspect of your life. It goes to your marriage. It goes to how you raise your kids. It goes to your job. It goes to your ministry. If you don't have guidance and you're not learning, there's wisdom out there. I mean, the whole book of Proverbs say wisdom is calling, and there's knowledge and wisdom out there. The question is, are we going to receive it? And are we going to learn it? And the guarantee is when you do, right, then victory is assured. Proverbs 4:6-7 says, do not forsake wisdom, and she will protect you. Love her, and she will watch over you. The beginning of wisdom is this: get wisdom. Right? I love that. Like, if you want to be smart, get wisdom, right? Though it costs you all you have, get understanding. And so if you're going to be in ministry, the reality is it might cost you everything to learn and get wisdom, but you got to have it, right? You got to be growing. And God has blessed just countless people with just fountains of wisdom that we can learn from, and we should be learning from that. And so every great leader that you see understands this, and they are great learners. And I promise that you look into their life, and they are always have been and always will be great learners. I read George Bush's memoirs. I saw it at your house, Decision Points, and he talked about, and there, him and Karl Rove in 2006 had a book reading contest between the two of them. Okay, now he's the president of the United States, the busiest man in the world, and Karl Rove probably, honestly, was busier at the time. Right? George Bush read. How many books do you think George Bush read in 1 year?
583.
No, 365 days. Just take a stab. 365 days, President of the United States. How many books?
92.
100?
92.
92. Okay. All right. So this is Jen. This is good. Okay. Zach is at how many?
100.
100. Okay.
157.
At 157. Man, 3 books a week. That's pretty impressive.
54.
Terry's going 54. He was from Texas. He's not that smart. Brother Loki, you got to go with it. Big BL.
Yeah.
I think he did more than that. I think he read 200.
200. All right. Jen gets the cookie. You read 95.
While he was in office, he read 95 books.
95 books in 2016. Jen gets the cookie. Okay. Karl Rove read 110. Okay. Ain't that crazy?
What kind of cookie? That's
Huh?
what she got.
You can have all those brownies out there.
Yeah, save the brownies
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah.
So the reality is this: a lot of us are like, man, I don't have time to learn, right? These guys were the businessmen in the world, and they learned all the time, and they made time. And the reality is what the scripture says is, though it costs you everything, though it costs you time, though it costs you some family time or TV time, get wisdom and understanding, okay? You have to seek it out. Here's what I believe some of the benefits of learning are. One, learning helps you to maximize your strengths, right? It helps you to maximize your strengths, right? A lot of us, we were, I was going so fast, I forgot to put the S on, or the X on there, and I was writing strength.
Yeah, that almost looked like mini Sherpas.
Okay, there you go. Okay.
I read Mrs.
Yeah, the max strength. Okay, it helps you maximize your strength. All right, here's a question for you. When was the last time you learned something to improve upon your strengths? Because a lot of times we look at ourselves and we see our deficiencies, and we're trying to learn to offset our deficiencies. But when you look at the great people in the world, people who are high achievers, they don't worry so much about their deficiencies. They try to do everything they can to maximize their strengths. Example, Olympic athlete. All right. If I'm a great swimmer, I'm not out there on the track field trying to run, right? I'm in the pool trying to get better as a swimmer, right? You go to, I remember listening to this, it was Rod Loyer, we were talking about him earlier, and he was at Olympic training ground, and he said he sat there for 2 hours and watched one of the gymnasts work on the position of her foot on her landing. Okay. Not the rest of the routine, 2 hours on the position of her foot and the landing, right? Why? Because she was trying to maximize her strengths. She knew every detail mattered. And so she was working on the things that were going to get her ahead, right? That's why every great athlete has a coach. Michael Jordan could have beat Phil Jackson in one-on-one blindfolded with one arm any day of the week, but yet he had a coach. Why? Because Phil Jackson could see the things that could be improved upon, and he knew how to bring the good things out of people. And so learning helps you to propel your strengths beyond the natural talent to a whole new level. Okay, and that's why some of the best coaches of all times have been the smallest kid, the most untalented people on the team. The old adage goes, if you can't play, then coach. And that's really not true. The reason why a lot of those guys weren't the best is because they didn't have the natural ability. So they had to work so much harder than everybody else. They had to learn a lot more than everybody else, and that allows them to be a good coach. So learn to maximize your strengths. Second thing that learning helps you do is it helps you engage you with new ideas, right? Patty said it a little bit ago, plateauing, right? That's going to be the natural deficiency for all of us. And so when you start learning, it engages you with new ideas, right? It helps you to see things out there that you've never seen before. It helps you to spark some creativity in your own mind. When you're constantly learning, you're constantly getting fresh ideas, you're constantly seeing things new ways. I think as a pastor, that's why I try to read, just to constantly hear how other people are interpreting things, because people bring fresh ideas. I use that. I gave a shout out this morning to Tim Keller on forgiveness. To me, that was the best explanation of forgiveness I had ever heard before, right? And I've heard a lot of sermons on forgiveness, but if I had not read that book and he talked about forgiveness, I wouldn't have used that. And who knows if it would have made a difference this morning, right? Because it engages you with fresh ideas. I'm going to give you another one here in a little bit. But Mark Rutland talked about this one time. He said, as a pastor, he said, I think you have to be reading and you have to be learning, because you have to put out so much content, and you're praying and you're seeking God. And I think that God teaches us through other people. I mean, in my opinion, reading a book is no different than hearing a sermon. I know that God has spoke to me, because some of these guys that I read, I mean, that's messages that I think God laid on their heart. And so it engages you with that. The third thing is that learning brings fresh focus, right? Because I think one of the biggest things about leadership is that you can get into a rut, not just plateau of ideas, but you can just be running 100 different directions at one time, right? And you can lose focus. And I think the enemy's greatest tactic against church leaders is just to pull them 100 different directions. The reality is that we are called to preach the gospel, and that kind of trumps everything else. And I think a lot of church people, a lot of pastors have been sucked down the road where they're doing a lot of good things, but they're not doing the God things. And there's and I think that the Bible's pretty clear that as pastors, there's a very narrow thing that you're supposed to focus on. And when you start deviating from that too much, you get in trouble. And so learning helps you to stay focused. It helps you to stay where you're at. So talked about the benefits a little bit. What are some practical ways? I want to get real practical for a minute. Some practical ways to be a good learner? Well, the first one is obviously to read books, right? How many of you guys are readers? Okay, good.
Everybody but me.
I read here, I used to, but I do read some.
Digital. I've moved from books to digital. Does that count?
Kindle or something?
Are they actually books, or are they like website articles?
Like a what?
Are they actual books, like you bought like a Kindle book or something?
No, I like excerpts. Thank you. I can't say that word.
Okay.
And I do have some books.
Yeah.
I'm not gonna lie. Right now, I'm reading about God's armor bearer. Okay. Have you ever read it?
I'm actually reading it right now. Yeah, the book.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I actually reading
Okay.
the whole book. But like if there's a Bible study or something, if the excerpts and doing that.
Yeah.
But I kind of flop back and forth.
Yeah.
And I have an actual, Kindle, but I've not on a Kindle, like on my iPhone downloaded book.
Yeah.
So,
I've
sorry.
gotten into
No.
audiobooks.
That counts, I think. My big thing is a lot of
You
people.
have to hold it.
I do too. That's why I
It has to be a
have.
physical book.
Yeah, I don't like reading off my iPad.
Fall asleep.
What I like is
I get too many
can-
things coming at me and I can't sit and focus
Yeah.
on it, but it comes in.
Absorb it.
I like, because I can highlight on my thing. That's why I like it.
Oh, I just
Highlighter.
highlight the book. I just draw and write the book. I don't care. I'm not letting anybody have them anyways most of the time. The reality is here's my argument for books is that a lot of people are like, well, you can get a lot of stuff on the internet. And that's true. And I think the internet's a great resource. I'm gonna put that up next. But at the end of the day, I still think the best and the oldest way to get knowledge is through reading books, because here's my argument. If I have something that is so valuable, why would I give it to you for free when you're likely to pay me for it? Let's just go with simple economics. I think if people have a really good idea, they're going to put it in a book because they know that they can sell it, And the fact of the matter is, good content's expensive. And I am a big believer in books. I wasn't always a reader. When I first started out, I wasn't at all. And I very quickly realized that I wasn't going to make it because there's a lot of things that I needed to learn. And so it was a discipline that I made in my life. And outside of prayer and reading the Bible, I think reading books has been probably one of the biggest things that have grown me, because it allows lots of different people to speak into your life, and it's become a passionate pursuit. And I truly do believe that God anoints a lot of material that comes out. It's obviously not on the level of Scripture. I'm not even coming close to saying that, but there are books that I've read that have wrecked my life. You know what I mean? That have brought conviction to my heart and made me want to chase after God more. And I quote them all the time. Tim Keller and A.W. Tozer and a guy by the name of J.I. Packer. I mean, those are men whose writings I truly believe are anointed, and they've challenged my life. And so I would encourage you. I don't know what your guys' normal reading plan is, but I think a minimum of 4 a year. I mean, that's doable. I mean, that's a chapter basically every 3 days. That's 4 pages a day. That's doable. And you would get through 4 books a year, and you'd be beating out most people around you. And I think that the secret is just finding the time. You know, it goes back to get wisdom, though it costs you everything. It might cost you some TV time at the evening to read a chapter, but it's an investment in your life and in your ministry that will definitely pay off at the end. If you guys are curious, probably my favorite books from spiritual health, anything A.W. Tozer wrote. I think he was a Pentecostal man who just truly understood what it meant to have fellowship with God. The leadership side of it, I've read Good to Great. That's my favorite. I told you guys that. Inspirational, you got to read Love Does by Bob Goff. Life Coaching, 7 Decisions of Successful People by Andy Andrews. And from a theology side, Knowledge of the Holy by, no, not Knowledge of the Holy. That's an A.W. Tozer book. Knowing God by J.I. Packer. This one's really good. You can see all the highlights in there. Yeah. That's good. Have you read that one, Brother Loki? Knowing God?
I don't think, I may have, I've read an awful lot of these.
Yeah, he's
Charles Swindoll was one of my authors, because he's an easy reader,
yes.
but he has something to say. He just keeps it simple where you can have a trouble understanding what he's trying to say. I do like, and man, his quotes are really good. If you've heard one quote from him, you've heard just a bajillion. He's good. I think the second place is obviously the internet, right? There's just mountain of resources out there. Some different blogs. Michael Hyatt has a great blog. There's a cool one for churches called Creation Swap. YouTube, Vimeo, especially from the worship side of things, you can just see tons of ideas and youth ministry stuff. Even the little devotion things. I think that's what you're talking about earlier, Patty.
And I do read. I'm having a tough time articulating today, but and I was a book reader. Like, there was a point in time that's all I did. And as I've dealt with some vision changes, I have grown dependent upon being able to magnify what I'm reading. And so it's not out of laziness, but I found that I'm into it more because I have my phone with me at all times. So if I take a break,
you can sit there.
it is, but that's my physical challenge is some of these. I bought a book by Stephen Furtick. I couldn't wait till I got it. And it's so small a print that
it's hard to read.
It just drives me crazy. I guess I have to get one of those big sheets.
Yeah, he's a better preacher than writer, if you're curious.
Well, I've watched and listened to him. So the book, I may not.
He used to be Austin's man crush.
I used to like him, and then this is digressing, but when he came out, that he had this self-motivational thing that they did, like to a song, and when I heard that, I was like, "This is the dumbest thing," and I lost all respect for him after that. I seriously did, because his sermons have digressed to like self-help inspiration.
I have noticed that.
He didn't used to be that way. He wasn't that way. I mean, he did the best series on Jacob I've ever heard. Death to Selfie was the series on. It might have been the best sermon series I've ever heard from front to end. I mean, good, solid. And then after that, he just took a nosedive into self-help, man. It was hard for me to swallow.
A lot of today's what's being produced a lot of the days is very man-centered.
Yes.
Where if you read the older authors, a lot of them, most of them are gods.
Yes.
And so we're so coming down so hard on the man end of things, we kind of
Yes.
almost leave God out of it.
That is so true. And here's another little thing too. And Brother Loki just hit on it. If you want to read something and you want to know if it's good or not, if the author's dead, and he's been dead for more than about 10 years, and that book is still in print, chances are there's a reason.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like there's a reason why Tozer stuff, literally, you go to Mardell's today and it's still on the bestseller rack. Okay? Because he has something to say.
Yeah.
And these other guys are just kind of going through some of the stuff, and it's, you know, for the heat of the
Almost
moment.
like they're on a fleeting moment, like they've had a thought and they didn't think about it too much, and then they've ran with it.
Yes.
Like, because it's outlandish.
Well, that's the day that we live in with social media too.
The-
It's just get your thought out there. And
The
then,
biggest fall from grace that I witnessed in my generation is the African American, I can't think of his name, out of Tulsa, and he had the largest.
Where he didn't live in hell.
Yes,
Yeah.
then he totally changed into this love. I mean, like he lost his whole church. He had this huge church, and I had been able to hear him a couple of times.
I
But
can't think of the name.
Uh-uh.
Anyway, he came up with the idea Jesus is not the only way. Finally,
Yes.
after the hell thing, it degenerated to that.
Well, that's pretty common. What's that guy's name? He was a big youth ministry guy. He wrote the book Love Wins. Rob Bell. Rob Bell. He did the same thing.
Mhm.
Yeah. Basically, everybody gets to go to heaven.
Mhm.
Under the internet one, is that supposed to be Gospel Coalition?
Yeah, I can't figure out Spell Coalition, so I
Just
gave up.
switch the L and the A.
Yeah, that's what I thought. I was wrong. Anyway, so you guys get it figured out. This is a great resource as far as they just have some real solid stuff from a spiritual side of things. Like if you just, it can be a good resource sometimes. Somebody has a question. That, and I tell you another resource on the internet too is I think it's gotquestions.com. It's Baptist, so be ready for that. Some of it's Baptist leaning, but solid. Most of it's solid. The other thing that you can do to really learn a lot is I'm a big believer in podcasts, especially when you're driving down the road. And I'll tell you guys two of these this is more leadership side of things, but Rod Loy, he's an AG guy, right? And he did a series called I Lead. And if you just look that up, Rod Loy, I Lead on podcast, you'll see it. It's about 8 parts, some of the best I've ever heard. And it's very Bible driven versus man centric. Some of this you could just walk into your local boardroom and they'd be great with that. Now from more of a practical life and leadership, Michael Hyatt, okay? And he has 2 of them. One of them is I think it's Your Life or something, but just look at Michael Hyatt and his stuff is very practical. And he has different tips on stuff. How many of you guys get overwhelmed and you're like, I don't know what to do next when you get really busy? He has a real simple walk you through that. Just some real good stuff on that. So I'd recommend that. The 4th thing you do is every time that you hear something, write it down. I'm a big believer in taking notes. Why remember it? Yeah, why remember it? That might be true, but something about writing something down makes you remember it differently. So I'm a big believer in taking notes. I'm a big believer in classes and conferences. That's why I signed us up to go to the conference thing, because it gets you in new environments. The 6th thing that you really need to do, and I'm running out of room, is this. You need to find a mentor. Okay, now let's talk about this a little bit. Find mentors. I don't believe a mentor needs to be somebody that you walk through life with every day. I think we got the bad definition. I think having a mentor means I'm inviting someone to speak into my life for this particular season or this particular question or this particular hour. There's only one way to get experience, to have experience. And the reality is this: I want people who have gone ahead of me speaking into my life. And I want to be able to talk to them. I want to be able to figure out if they really know what they're talking about. And I want to hear it. All right. Anybody can sell a book, right? And you put the right title on that book and, you market it right, you can sell the book. When you're sitting there looking at somebody in the eyes and they've walked through what you're walking through, that's a whole different ball game. So here's what I've experienced is that people love sharing what they know with people who are eager to listen and ask questions. And that's the big deal. What accomplished people hate is for you to sit down with them and just talk about yourself the whole time. One of the most embarrassing things I've ever been through is we had a children's pastor in Verdigris, and I cold called this church in Oklahoma City, Herbert Cooper. In fact, the guy I was talking about this morning who preached that message was Herbert Cooper. They have about 6,000 people at their church in Oklahoma City. And I cold called his staff and said, hey, me and my children's pastor would like to come meet your children's pastor and youth pastor. They said, yeah, great, come down. So we went down to lunch with them, and literally for 45 minutes, he griped about how terrible his life was to these people. And you could just see on their eyes, like, you're wasting my time. You don't want to be that person, all right? But what I have figured out is if you sit down with somebody, you can cold call just about anybody, and they'll meet with you for an hour. But when you sit down, you start asking questions, and you shut your mouth and you let them talk. And I will tell you what, they will talk to you for the rest of the day. Why? Because people like sharing what they know. And they like investing in other people, and they like, for the most part, helping people. People in the ministry world who are accomplished, they got there for a reason. We were talking about that early. And they got there because they love people and they like investing in people, and they also know their stuff. And so to me, I think you guys all need to be doing that, where you're looking out and say, who can I learn from in, my respective field? And I can just cold call them and say, hey, I saw you do this. I'd love to spend some time. So the question is, how do you do that? And here's some things that I have done that have really helped me to, no one's ever turned me down, just to be real honest with you, because I've gone through this. And so first thing is this. You got to obviously find somebody. So let's say there's a worship leader. You're like, I think I can learn from this person. One is you offer to buy them lunch. You always have to have an investment into the game. All right. That shows a sense of seriousness. Two, you got to set expectations in your correspondence with them. Right. So, hey, I'd love to meet with you for an hour, and I'd love to buy your lunch and ask you some questions about, and then you tell them the topic in which you want to talk to them about. So you're setting expectations, because nobody wants to get stuck in a hostage situation where you're sitting there with somebody for 4 hours, right? So you set the expectation of time and while you're there, and they know it's not going to cost them anything. You got to be professional in your correspondence with them. When you're done, always write them a thank you note for their time. If you really want to do something and you notice something, send them a little gift, right? There was a guy I sat down with a while back, and he told me he loved coffee. So for $15 and then ship it to him, it was worth my investment to spend that, because he'll remember me, right? When you go with good questions. Smart people hate stupid questions, and there is such a thing as stupid questions. Okay, so don't go in there with dumb questions, okay? And number 6, for the love of everything sacred, take notes, okay? People who are smart tend to be note takers, and they hate talking and no one's taking notes because they know they're never going to remember it. Okay, so be a note taker. Now, what that does is that sets an expectation that you value what they're telling you, right? That's why when I sit down, I say, hey, I'm not playing on my phone, right? I'm taking notes. I just set that up from the very beginning, and people are like, okay, that's cool. Now, you ready for some questions? You guys might want to take notes on these. So I'm about to give you 10 good questions. You ready?
No.
Yeah, see, you guys need to be taking notes.
I did. I already started with Rob Lloyd, I believe, Michael Hyatt.
There you go.
I took notes from this morning.
All right, you ready? I'm telling you, these are 10 good questions you could ask anybody. Sit down. Here's another pro tip. I'll leave these on my phone, so if I run into somebody, I don't have to think. I can just look up real quick and say, okay, this person would be really good to ask this question. You ever been to they do this almost every district council. You're sitting down and they have, all right, let's start asking them questions. Everybody sits there and looks like a dork. Have these on your phone, you won't look like a dork, okay? If you were me, what questions should I be asking right now? And you put, obviously, your season of life. So this guy that I sat down with the other day, all right, so I just started out in lead pastor role. I've been in this thing for 6 weeks. If you were me, what questions should I be asking right now? This guy had 30 years of experience. Mm-hmm. 2, what is one characteristic you believe every leader should possess? I put leader in there. It depends on the context of the person I'm sitting with.
Excuse me, I messed
Thank
up.
you.
What was number 1?
If you were me, what question should I be asking right now?
Still got part of it wrong.
And you preface that with whatever context you're in. 2, What is one characteristic that you believe every leader should possess? Or if you're sitting down with a youth pastor, what is one characteristic every pastor should possess? Or if I'm sitting down with a worship leader, what's one characteristic of worship? I mean, obviously you said it for your context. All these are contextual.
What is one characteristic you believe every
What
leader
is
should
one characteristic every
leader should possess?
should possess?
Number 3, what are the biggest challenges facing leaders today? Again, it can be contextual. What are the biggest challenges facing worship leaders? What's the biggest challenge facing youth pastors? What's the biggest challenge facing pastors' wives?
Today,
Again,
you said?
yeah, today.
Do shorthand, I'd write faster.
I need shorthand too. I could email these to you. You just want me to email them?
You can go over them, but still email.
Okay.
Me too,
What I'll do so you guys don't have to write them down is I will put them right now. I'm going to email them to all of you guys.
Bruce Stevens' sister was my business teacher.
Okay. I will go through these quick. Okay. And I'll just email them to you so you don't have to. Can you name a person who had tremendous impact in your life as a leader, pastor, maybe someone who was a mentor to you? Why did this person impact your life? Because you're looking for principles. What are the most important decisions you make as the leader of your organization? Church. As church or organization gets longer, there's a tendency for institution to dampen inspiration. How do you keep that from happening? I mean, how do we not become a bureaucracy, and how do we keep this thing, fresh and anointed, if you will? How do you encourage creative thinking in your organization? Where the greatest ideas come from in your organization? What is one thing that excites you about the church today, and what is one thing that concerns you? I almost always ask that question to people who've been in ministry for a long time, and it's very interesting, their answers. What are you doing to ensure that you continue to grow as a leader? Again, all of those are contextual. And so you change the wording to fit the context in which you're sitting in. Okay. And I'm going to send these to you right now, and then you'll have them. But those are 10 great leadoff questions. And obviously you would never get through all 10 of those in an hour, because they're going to talk and it's going to lead from one thing to the next. And then what you have just done is you've just honored them with their time versus sitting down and asking, superficial questions, right? And then, you can have more specific questions to your context, all right? The last thing about learning that I want you to see is that you need to look for principles and not specifics. And this is where a lot of people get held up. They'll say, well, that person is in such a bigger church than I am. There's nothing I can learn from them. And that may be true, but a principle is a principle regardless of size. When I went to North Little Rock and I talked to Rod's guys, I learned a lot of principles from just being around them versus specifics. I went out there because they had the greatest idea of youth ministry I'd ever seen. They had this thing called class pastors, and they had 8 people that were not on staff. It was volunteers. And at 5th grade, these people made a commitment to go from 5th grade to first year of college with a group of kids. It's just a revolutionary idea. And so they commit 8 years of their life to being at that church, leading that group of kids. And it's amazing what God's doing through there. But you have to have enough people to make that happen. Very few places have that kind of crowd, if you will, to draw from to be able to make that happen. But there's a lot of principles I still was able to learn from there. Okay. All right. So value number 5. All right. Brothers and sisters, serving brothers and sisters. Okay, here's the reality. We talked about, I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this one because we dive pretty deep into this subject of serving is leadership in lesson number 1, and that's the biblical model of leadership. But there's some pro tips that I was thinking about that I wanted to share with you when you're talking about serving each other, okay? Serving your team and serving this church. Those are the 3 groups of people that we are called to serve as pastors here, is each other, our team, and the church. All right. And there's some good ways in which we can do this. Number 1 is you need to own your zone. You need to take responsibility with excellence in your area of ministry so that someone else doesn't have to pick up your slack. I mean, you need that. How much better is it to serve each other than if we're not having to pick up after each other, right? I mean, let's take for example. Let me think of a good example. I don't have a good example.
I have a good example.
What's a good example?
Me on Sunday mornings with music.
Yeah, I can't. Yeah, you gotta pick that up.
Sheet music,
Yeah,
Gotta own it. If
especially when you share the stage like between Wednesday night and Sunday night.
Yeah.
Like I'd be great at picking up sheet music, but Wednesday night would not be. So I'm going behind and clearing theirs before I can get mine put out. And it annoys you, doesn't it? If you have to
It
clean
has-
up after
Yeah.
somebody
it
else.
is, and not putting like things unplugged or earpieces missed or
Yeah.
been stepped on. It's just putting things away, but I have to take ownership
Yes.
with it.
We have to do that.
yeah, you gotta own your zone. Second thing is go above and beyond. If everyone does a little bit more that's required, then you're helping all three of those categories, right? Honestly, you know, Mimi's like, you don't have to help me move chairs on Wednesday morning. Now we don't have to move chairs on Wednesday morning because we found some hidden somewhere. But the point is, it's just the little things. No, I wouldn't have to, but for two reasons. Number one, as a man, I can't let her move that on my own. That's just a principle of mine. But number two, if everybody does a little extra than what they're required to do, first off, that sets a great, healthy culture for your team in the church. But more than that, it's just a blessing to each other. You're serving other people, right? Number three, be a spiritually healthy you, right? If we are not spiritually healthy, we are draining to, you're not serving anybody on this team if you're spiritually unhealthy, right? You're dying. Number four, be a team player. Team players have each other's backs and they want to see others succeed as much as they want to see themselves succeed. And a team player understands that when you win, I win, right? And when I win, you win. And that's not always what happens in a church. When we have an individualistic silo mentality in our ministries, and we're making a go at it on our own. And that's not how God designed the body of Christ. He said every part has a purpose. And I promise you, this church is dead without the teenagers. And this church is dead without the youth. And this church is dead without the kids. We are not operating the way we should unless we are team players and we're seeing each other succeed. Case in point, I, as a youth pastor, there was a 3-year period there, or excuse me, a 2-year period there where I graduated 50 kids and I gained 0 from the kids ministry. Do you think my youth group grew? No. The numbers, we were growing. We were just sending them out faster than we were getting fed in. And in a youth ministry, every year you lose kids. You know, in the church, you're always going to be losing people, but hopefully not at the same rate that you are in kids ministry and youth ministry. And so whenever we got Andrew, pastor asked me just to take him out for a while during the interview process. And I did. And I promised him, I said, there's no one who's going to be championing you more than me. Because I've just suffered the last 3 years where my youth attendance stays like this because the kids ministry wasn't doing their job. You know, so when you win, I win, right? When the youth group's healthy, that means people are excited to be here at church. When worship's good, that means people are excited at church. So if we're fighting against each other, that's a problem. That's a problem. Number 5, you got to speak well of each other in the market. If you want to serve each other, then speaking well of each other is just an absolute must. We serve each other by supporting each other. I love what the scripture says. I think it's in Galatians. He's like, be careful about how you talk about each other or you'll devour each other. Mm-hmm. And that's so true. And especially starts in this room. And because small towns have a mentality a lot of times where they don't talk good about each other because they feel like family. So they just kind of talk bad about each other all the time. And in some ways, that's just the nature of the beast because people care for each other. And sometimes families treat each other worse than they would treat their enemy because they do love each other. So it makes them more comfortable to say whatever they want. But the reality is that's not good. That's not good. And if we can create a healthy culture where people are constantly speaking well of each other, then that's going to filter down, not just from each other, but to our team. That's going to filter down into the church.
Can I read the scripture that I showed you last night about that?
Yes.
It was Proverbs 16:24. Gracious words are a honeycomb, sweet to the soul and healing to the bones. And I liked what that last word, the bones, like down to the core, it's healing. Sweet words are. You know, it's not surface sweet, but it gets you down to the core when someone is sweet to you and says something nice to you. It's healing down to the inside.
Absolutely.
My mother, when I was raised, she had this statement, and her mother lived by it, and she lived by it. pounding on us. If you can't think of something good to say about somebody, don't say anything.
Don't say it at all.
And that was pounded in me. And so my grandmother, who was a charter member of the First Baptist Church in Henderson, when she died, Dr. somebody, forgot his name, Robert, he was the head of the Southern Baptist Annuity Board. He was also her uncle.
Yeah.
He said, I've never heard Ollie Barrett say one critical word about anybody.
Wow. That's a good testimony.
When he died, I thought, well, I've learned that a long time ago.
Yeah.
You can live that way.
Yes.
If you really want to.
If you really want to, you can do it.
And it goes for yourself too, like the words you speak over yourself.
Yeah.
I talk about that a lot. Like, it's not just, lift others up. You need to lift yourself up too and speak those words over yourself. If you're speaking negatively upon yourself, you're going to start believing those things.
Well, and it's easy to get frustrated. I mean, let's just be honest. At the end of the day, when we're talking about how we're speaking well of each other, is that we're going to get frustrated with each other. We're going to get frustrated with people on the team. We're definitely going to get frustrated with people in the church. But it's having the self-discipline to understand that I'm probably going to get what I speak into existence. So if I'm speaking well of other people and I'm looking for their high points, and chances are that's what's going to come out. Does that mean you don't have tough conversations with people on your team? Of course not. That's not what we're saying. But the reality is, at least in the marketplace, we need to be speaking very well of each other because that's going to go a long ways. Number 6, point praise to the team and away from self, right? If you want to serve your team, then when things go well, you find somebody to blame for it going well. And when things go bad, you just look in the mirror.
Yeah.
And that will just help you a lot. So somebody comes up and says, man, I tell you what, worship was good today. Then you say, yeah, that's because Amy just killed it when she was leading that. You know what I'm saying? Like, just constantly point. And that does a couple things for you. 1, you're building up your team. 2, it keeps you from being tested by the praise, because Scripture says we're tested by the praise we receive. And, when you look in the mirror for when things go bad, then you can really come to evaluate. Last thing you can do as a leader, start blaming people, right? Again, that doesn't mean that somebody on the team doesn't make a mistake and you're going to have to sit them down and say, look, you did this and this is going to get fixed. But generally speaking, out there, when things are going bad, you got to look internal. Because I promise you this, man, you throw a person under the bus one time, you could really lose and damage your position with them. We had a pastor one time. My parents were in on a coup. They were angry at our youth pastor. It was terrible. And they went to the pastor, and the pastor let them grill the youth pastor in front of them. Terrible. Ruined her. My parents were in on it. I'm ashamed of that. But the fact of the matter is, he should have defended her in that moment. And if she did something wrong, he needed to deal with that behind a closed door. But you got to stick up for each other out there. Number 7, get valuable insight and opinion, right? Don't get distracted when it's not received. If you want to serve each other, look for ways to say, hey, I saw this one really good. Hey, I had this idea. Do with it what you want. I'm just throwing it out there. Don't hold, and if they don't like it, or it doesn't stick to them, that's great. That's fine. Just move on. Hey, I heard this song the other day. I don't know if you like it. Hey, I saw the youth doing something. I saw an idea. Maybe you want it, maybe you don't. Hey, I saw, for example, I told Mimi the other day when I went and talked to this gentleman in Oklahoma City. He told me a story about how he steps into this church and he catches the gentleman leading the senior adult ministry having an affair on his wife, who was an invalid. Okay, so the only people he had left were the senior adults, because everybody else had done left, because the 2 pastors before him had all had moral failures. So he's pastor number 3. Pastor number 1 and 2 have a moral failure. Now he steps in. The staff member he has left is a senior adult minister. That's all they have on staff. And now he is cheating on his wife. And he goes to the board, and the board says, look, we know he's doing it, but he's the only guy left and everybody likes him, and we're afraid what's going to happen if we fire him. He says, well, we're going to have to let the cards fall where they may, because this is about integrity and honor and God's word. And so we're going to have to let him go. So now here he is, he steps into this mess, and now he's leading the senior adult ministry. And he had never been on staff at a church. And so he says, I had no other idea. So he goes to Mardell. They used to make these books that had youth ministry games before the internet. He buys 3 of those, and he starts playing these games with the senior adults. Yeah. And he said, if I'm lying, I'm dying. The most requested game that we did, and they asked us to do this over and over again, was a snowball fight. He said, so I have all these senior adults, and they would go buy these big marshmallows. We did this in youth over and over again. And he says, you would see these senior adults hiding behind tables, chunking marshmallows at each other. He said it had so fun. But he said, you know what we started doing? He said, and we need to make this happen. He said, we took, and they had a few events where they got some of their best teenagers and they made them coaches for the senior adults. So they have like a senior adult hangout night. They'd get like 8 teenagers and they would break them up into 4 teams, 2 coaches, and the kids had to coach the senior adults. And he said it was amazing. And so when I heard that idea, I threw that at Mimi. I was like, you should make that happen. You guys should get together, because one thing, again, we just talked about a minute ago, we need each other, right? And if you had the teenagers coaching the senior adults like that, because we have some fun senior adults, that would be an interesting thought. So throw ideas out. If you guys don't want to do it, you don't have to do it. Number 8, respect each other's home times. Try to think about that on communication. This is one thing I'm trying to do really well, is make sure that communicate to you guys the best I can during the day, send stuff and then you can watch it in your own time, but try not to send texts and stuff in the evening. I'm trying to do that, and we need to try to respect each other. Okay. Number 6, last value is this: teams. We live together and we die alone, right? You have to be developing your team. We're going to dive deep into this later on, but I want to give you some high points here, okay? Ephesians 4:11, paraphrasing it, says this, is that the role of a pastor is to equip the saints for the work of ministry, right? That's it. I mean, you want to see our job description, it's to equip saints. Equip saints, period. So in modern terms, that's developing a team. That's exactly what we see the apostles doing. They're there preaching. All the widows are angry, fighting with each other. And they said, look, we're going to put some people in charge of this because we got to devote ourselves to the preaching of the word. Mm-hmm. And the reality is there's a few things that only you can do. And if you allow yourself to get distracted, then you're not doing what God's called you to do. And you're not doing the ultimate thing He's called you to do, which is equipping the saints. All right. And so ministry is all about people. Pastoring is all about people. Leading is all about people. So in all aspects of it, you better be developing your team of people that are on there. And frankly, and every single one of us, we are hosed without our team. Mm-hmm. Right? Worship team, it's in the title, right? Youth ministry. The ability for you to lead kids goes to about, 10, and that's it, personally. So if you don't have a team of people who are helping you with this, then you're really limiting yourself in a hurry. Okay. And so leaders develop people. A manager tells them what to do. And I want you to quiz yourself. A leader develops people. Managers tell them what to do. And what we do a lot of times in church is that we manage people, meaning we find a problem, we find a hole, and we shove a volunteer in it. We tell them what to do, and then we manage them. But we haven't really led them or developed them into anything. You start thinking about the people in your life who have really mentored you, and you'll start to see that they actually developed your purpose of who you were. And so my question to you is the people on your team, have you developed their purpose? Have you made them better people? I'm tired of it. You know I'm trying to write to develop to them.
And that's an ouch one.
Yeah, have you developed them? Who invested your life? Many times when you start looking at the people who mentored you, it wasn't their spiritual intellect. It wasn't that they were intellectual genius. It was that they're regular people who took time to invest in you and give you a shot and spoke into. So who can you invest in? That's the question. We as a church have to realize that no one has to do what we say. Everybody's here by a volunteer. Okay. And I was explaining this to Pastor Jamie the other day. This principle, you have to be developing people, and they need a return on their investment. ROI, return on investment. What is the return on investment to your volunteers in your ministry? Because they're investing in you, right? Like every Wednesday night, you have people showing up, investing in your ministry, investing in these kids, right? They're investing in their weeknights when they're leading small groups to prepare. They're investing in you. You have people investing in the worship team by showing up to practice, by giving up their Sunday mornings, by being here and you have extra time. All right, brother, you have people investing in making meals and bringing them for teenagers. Right? We have you guys investing. So they're investing in you? What is their return on their investment? Now we understand there's a spiritual return. We get that. And I believe that's absolutely valid. right? But no one likes to serve and work when they're not seeing a return on their investment. And this is very important with our volunteers because our volunteers need to see a return on their investment. They need to see a return on their investment. If I put money in the stock market, I expect a return on my investment. I expect to see a return. And when your volunteers spend time in your ministry, when our volunteers spend time in our church, they expect to see a return on their investment. So what is a reasonable return on investment for a volunteer? I think first off is that it's an enjoyable experience. I don't think serving in church should be, painful. I mean, is that unspiritual? I think that most of the time when they show up, it should be an enjoyable experience. Is serving on your team enjoyable or is it draining? I mean, that's a tough.
You all don't say a word.
That's a tough question to ask yourself.
Yes.
But it's a legitimate question. Do people like being on your team or do they do it out of obligation? Let's just be real.
Obligation, isn't it?
Brass tacks.
Well, older people, obligation's a big thing.
It is. But how many times have we done stuff out of obligation that was painful? We're like, man, I hate this.
I'm saying they'll probably do it even anyway.
Yeah.
But it's still our responsibility to try to make it enjoyable.
Yeah. I don't think the disciples walking with Jesus was a drudgery. I mean, I really don't think it was. I think
Oh, we gotta go to this mountain again.
there had to be some fun.
This mountain again?
That doesn't mean there wasn't a lot of work. And that doesn't mean that there's a lot of experiences that are unenjoyable, but the totality of the serving, I think, should be enjoyable. I mean, I think even when circumstances are bad, man, I enjoy being around people. And there's lots of things that you can bring joy from. I think, Jesus, they're there, crucifying him. And his disciples ran off, but most of them came back. There was a joy that was about them. I mean, they caught the people's attention even under persecution. So not every aspect is enjoyable, but it was an enjoyable experience because they were together, okay? That should be a return on investment to our volunteers. I think the other thing is that it should be role changing. Meaning that our volunteers need to actually see a harvest for what we're doing. Right? Like ministry should be fruitful. Are they seeing fruit for their investment? We're not paying them. They're volunteers. We can't pay them. That's the whole point.
Yeah.
And I think sometimes churches are bad about paying too many people, right? Because it's about being fruitful, right? So are they seeing fruit for the investment that they've made, right? Are people getting saved? Do they see people worshiping, engaging in worship? It needs to be fruitful.
Probably the biggest thing for the team that I've seen is the girls. You can yay or nay on this. Used to be we would not see anybody worshiping like it. 6 months to 12 months we've seen. Nosedive and then like you plateau and then you climb back up. But to this morning to see people moving to the left or like little kids at first there wasn't very many, but as we got into the song, but it makes me feel good because I get to hide behind that keyboard. They're out there in the front and I don't know what that does for you, but to me it makes my heart just melt.
Well, it's easier to lead a song when
people are engaging.
People are receiving it.
Oh,
and
Yeah.
enjoying
And seeing it's an older couple that just started coming back, but to see her and him, moving out into the
That's
little
Burkholders, Arbuckles.
it.
Arbuckles.
We're going to the other two.
Yeah, I know. I'm sorry. Too many burps. A return on investment. For lack of a better term, I'm going to say pride. Is there professionalism and excellence in what you do? Like, does this feel like, okay, this was well ran, this was organized, like this, do people have a sense of professionalism? Do they feel like they're doing a good job? People tend to enjoy things more when they feel like they're doing a good job than when they feel like they're doing a terrible job. How many of you ever been put in a situation where you felt ill-equipped, you didn't know what you were doing, right? You didn't have the resources you need, and you get thrown in there? It's frustrating. Right? So when there's a sense of pride and we're properly resourcing them and training them and we're giving them a sense of professionalism, that's a return on their investment. Okay. And the last one, and perhaps the most important one, I think, is they feel value. Are they receiving value? Are people more equipped for their calling? Not your ministry, but are they more equipped for their calling? Right? Not the job you gave them, but their calling. Let's take low hanging fruit. Let's pick on Macy for a minute. Okay. We don't know what her calling is in the long term. Obviously, she's probably going to be a worship leader someday. But at the end of the day, the goal for her should be not that she's better for here, but that she's better for there.
Right.
And if she's better for there, then she's going to be way better for here. Not everybody, let's say, let's pick on somebody else on the worship team real quick. Let's take Sherry Allen. Okay. Sherry Allen's probably not called to be a worship leader. She's never expressed that to me, at least. I've asked her different things and what she wants to do in life. Her personal calling is probably not to be a worship leader, but on your team, you can equip her for her calling. Does that make sense? In youth ministry, those people that are there, what is their calling? Let's take somebody like Dana. I don't know what her long-term calling is, if it's to be a small group leader or not, but my suspicion is that it's not. Just from the little conversations I had, I feel like God's grooming her for something that's different than that. So serving on your team, are you helping add value to her life so she's equipped for her calling, not just what you need her to do? Man, let me tell you something. If you can give your volunteers those 4 things, now you're giving them a return on their investment.
Yeah.
And what you're doing is you're developing people versus managing people. Now, this is not normally what we do, right? Normally in church, we focus on my needs. Well, I need a guitar player, right? My crisis, man, we have too many kids and we need some small group leaders, right? We focus on, we need to do it on my time, okay? My way. And we focus on do something that I don't want to do. Let's just be honest. Like, I do not want to sit with the girls' small group, which might be true, but we focus on this, okay? Something I don't want to do. Or can't do. Patty, can you play the drums?
Yeah, I think I could.
But can you today? Like, we go in there
I
now?
couldn't for a church service,
Okay.
but I could go in there and.
That's good enough.
Yeah.
You don't have to, okay?
Okay.
Something I don't want to do or something I can't do. Right? There's a lot of things I can't do. I cannot lead children's ministry. I've never done it, don't want to. God's not called me to do that, okay? Give me the teenagers or you give me the children. I'm taking the teenagers every time. Okay? Because kids scared the life out of me, right? So here's the reality. There is a sense of reality in this.
Yeah.
But if the focus is only here and not here, then this is about me and this is about them. So what are you focused on? Are you focused on you or are you focused on them?
My grandiose idea that I can play drums.
We're going to throw you out there, just find out, okay? Now, when
If it's you're gonna have a bunch of turnover.
you're going to have a bunch of turnover, right? So in our context of team, we have to be really good at developing people and we have to be giving them a good return on their investment. Okay, 7 o'clock. I got done before 7. That was my big goal. Okay, so questions. I'm going to shut this off. I want to give you guys a few minutes if you had anything, any comments, questions. An hour and 8 minutes. I did really good keeping all these fairly short.